Uh-oh, it's not a low-code environment. It's a high-code. It's a pro-code environment. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another awesome day of FileMaker training. It's fmtraining.tv. So welcome to fmtraining.tv. I'm Richard Carlton, creator of FM Training. Before we look at Christian too much, I'm going to pop up our upcoming schedule and take a quick gander at that. Today and tomorrow is painting yourself into a corner. There's a couple different ways of painting yourself into a corner. We're going to dive into that today, talk about it. And hopefully no one will be too offended by the conversation that takes place here. Then Thursday. So Christian has been kind of idle, kind of quiet. He didn't have to prep too much for today and tomorrow. And then if he can surface a little bit on Thursday, so there's this new version of FileMaker 19.2.2.2.3.5.3.b.r.11115. And that version of FileMaker basically has some really neat stuff in it. In fact, I didn't realize how neat it was. In fact, it's so neat that we had to create a new webinar coming up. I don't know if they created the artwork for it yet. So this is upcoming broadcast. So this is a follow-on. So in a couple days, you've got the broadcast on 19.2.2. They're going to talk about this a little bit, but then we have a dedicated day to talk about gold coins in the FileMaker platform. April 12th, Christian will be talking about that. If you are a intermediate to senior level developer, you're going to dig this. Megan, you will start to appreciate this. Your skill set is progressing along really, really well. You've been taking notes, which is awesome. So, but this is Christian and the gold coin search. Very exciting. So, it's the hidden gold coins. Because basically what we did is we figured out that Claris put some amazing gold coins in the product, and they didn't bother to tell anyone, right? They just left it in a README in a really small font. By the way, it does this little thing, right? And if you're a developer, you're like, wait a minute. Holy beep. All right, Christian, you have to make beeps for me every time I say something. Holy beep. All right, like this is the most amazing beep. Right, see, so just like that. So, and then we're going to pick up the conversation. I don't really have anything specific on Friday right now, so if anyone has a topic you want to pick up on Friday, let me know. Maybe we'll just take the day off or drink adult beverages. So if you have something you want us to talk about, that would be great. So next Monday, Nick is going to kick off some reports. Nick does 2 or 3 days each week, and he'll be doing some reporting for us. And then as a reminder, for those of you, most of you are not these people here, but there are people who work at bigger companies and they have specific training budgets. If you have a training budget and you want to attend some additional neomorphism design style stuff with Nick Hunter, that is a paid event. You can get access to that at FileMakerFM-neomorphism.com. It works out to about $100 an hour for 5 hours of training. Some people are like, oh, that's too much money. That's fine. Then don't attend. But there are people who are buying it, who are stepping into it. And so that helps keep the piggy bank running and Nick gainfully employed, which is always a useful thing. So Kyle Williams is there. That's awesome. Great. Kyle is there. So I know that if we have a JSON question, we'll do that. So there's Christian. Everyone, hello. What's everyone? Welcome, Christian. Hi, Christian. Christian, what do you do? What do you do at RCC?
I lose track sometimes of the amount of hats that I have. I think that I work with FileMaker for the most part.
He works with FileMaker. He babysits junior engineers. He finds gold nuggets and things that people have forgotten about. So today is an interesting topic. So it's about painting yourself into a corner with FileMaker, right, Christian? Actually, let me do this. So you're over here. Let me flip this around. It looks like we're not looking at each other. So let me help you real quick here. Let me do this. That we feel better about each other. There we go. Now we're like.
Oh, I like that because I glance at the screen.
Yeah, you're looking at the wrong thing. So now I'm looking at you. Feel better about that? Everyone just disregard that the text is backwards. So let's talk about building yourself into a corner, painting yourself into a corner. So the terminology, for those of you who don't, maybe it's an American thing. I don't know where the etymology of this thing comes from. But the idea is that if you're painting the floor and the walls, and you're painting and you're kind of backing up, because you don't walk forward and paint, you back up and paint, right? So you're not really watching behind you. For a lot of people, you're painting, you back up. If you paint going forward, then your feet step through the paint. So you kind of paint, back up, paint, back up. And you get to a corner where you can't get out of the room without stepping on the paint and screwing stuff up. That's kind of an analogy of what we're talking about, right? And the idea is how do you get into this? And it can happen quite by accident, but we've had a couple people that were kind of a little bit on the belligerent side lately, and so we wanted to kind of address this in a couple different ways. One of the questions that came up was a good one. Someone said, well, I've been using regular serial numbers. We'll start with some easy ones, Christian, before we get to yours.
Sure.
They did my training where I talk about learning relationships, and the relationship is with a serial number. So record number 1, 2, 3, and then you understand cross-connect it to record 1, 2, 3 over here, and you understand that. I don't tell people to use UUIDs initially because it's 32 characters. Their little brains explode because they can't really see that many numbers really in their head. Like if I give you a 32-digit number and I ask you to repeat it, most people can repeat the beginning or ending 4 or 5 characters really at the end of the day. And for when you're trying to teach people something, you don't want to make it harder. Cognitive overhead is official terminology for making it something that takes more brain power. Cognitive overhead is the overhead of what you have. And so you want it as simple as possible. So when I'm training, I'm trying to do it very specifically. So someone says, hey, Richard, watch your training. You said you use serial numbers, but now everyone's saying that I've moved up in the world and I should use UUIDs. How do I switch to using UUIDs? and so if someone has a database, say they have a single FileMaker file with 5 tables and it has serial numbers everywhere. Christian, how would you adjust that? How would you fix that? I mean, we're not going to do it, but walk us through.
If someone had serial numbers and wanted to switch over to UUIDs, first, very carefully, but it would basically be a series of replace commands, either with scripts or manually doing it. But I'd have to figure out where the top of the food chain is.
The top,
probably
like the parent record, right? Like maybe contact.
Yeah. I sometimes I refer to like databases in terms of like rivers because you have things upstream and downstream.
Correct. Upstream.
Yeah,
downstream.
so you got to change that from an ID to a UUID, and then you have to find all the records and all the database and all the tables that would have that ID and change it over. But step one would be make a backup before you do this. Because this is how you destroy databases.
Okay, hang on. You keep talking, Christian. 1 second. I got my computer over here just blinked out on me. Keep going.
If you haven't done replace commands before, either make a backup or something that I've even done is make a duplicate field. That way, if I make a simple calculation mistake, I can grab it out of that and I'll delete the temp fields afterwards. You can do this with a script to save a lot of time. You just have to be really careful. It's not necessarily hard, but one misstep can destroy all of your related records.
So what I would do, if you asked me and I said, go do it like right now, I would start at the top of up the food chain, or top of the river. I would start a loop that started at the very top. Now I'm sure that this is not lean design, but it's a process I would run once only and I would never run it again after that. So I'm not worried about performance for the next 10 years. It would be very simple to cognitively understand. I would start at the very top of the entire found set of records. I would find the older primary key. I might save that, but then I would what I would do is I would basically create a new UUID. You set it into a variable. Give me a new UUID, which will be the primary key for that. And then what I do is I go to related record still with the serial. So you go to related record downstream, and then set that into that primary key because it's in your variable, right? Your global variable. And then back out and then go to related record. And keep going to related records using the old keys, right? Putting that new value in there. And then at the end, you would actually take that value and stick it in the uphill side. Is one way of doing it. You just have to do it very carefully. And then after you build it, you're going to step through it very carefully, watching to make sure it works correctly, right?
You know what would be actually kind of interesting to do too is change the parents to the new IDs, but maybe don't actually change them last, but get it like you said, but then make a relationship from all the other tables back to the parent and just do a lookup.
So maybe make half does another. I would just tend to script it.
That would be the lean way of
the lean way. And I'm going to do a quick moment here. So there was on Slack, if I can go to hang on 1 second. I want to go over here. I want to go to the video production Slack. Is it in here? This is a great photo that came up today. So someone sent me this photo. I'm going to put it over your face briefly here, Christian. So this is a photo that was posted to us, people taking the book and doing anchor buoy. And so this was Keith, I think. Awesome job with the photograph, Keith, of showing us that you're using the training and making great relational solutions, right? And they're not perfect, but you clearly can see delineation of anchor buoy, and that will greatly improve the performance. So I just want to do a shout out. He was posted with his photo, right? So like if Larry was posting with a photo, Marines, he'd be assaulting up the beach. He'd have all his ACU on, or OCPs, or in the Marines, whatever you call your battle dress uniform. And then, he's laying down suppressive fire and he's reading the book at the same time. It'd be pretty awesome. So, that would be a fun photo. But yes. So that's one solution. So what's another solution that we run into?
You mean like
painting yourself into a corner?
Runs into?
Painting into a corner.
I mentioned this at the end of yesterday's stream, and you weren't here yesterday, but I thought it was good to start with redoing the wolf pack, because the first step in all of this is eating a little bit of humble pie, as another engineer once said to me, and acknowledging that we make mistakes. So with Wolfpack as an example, the UI layout that I had actually had put me into a corner where I was having a lot of difficulty adding the help section. Nick's very slight change of going from portals into a card and being in the target file suddenly made what was an issue so much easier to deal with. So I think that UI design can be one. Obviously, I'm staring at a giant Excel sheet right now, so I'm thinking of how people tend to use fields in lieu of related records, especially when they're novices.
So let's talk about that. That's a kind of a really, really, really important one. So if you want to go and show your screen, go ahead and kick it over. I want to credit Lobster coming from Lobster. So if there's anything really unsavory in here, we're just going to blame it on Ellen. That being said, she is a really great supporter of us here. We greatly appreciate her hard work. So if you want to, wow, your screen is small. You want to like...
oh, I forgot.
That's fine. Just you can keep it like this. Just to go to like change your percentage up here to like super...
like 1,000,000.
Well, start with like 300 or something, but you'll. Okay,
how's that?
Yeah, so you've got how many fields across here do we have? Like, I mean, just
she sent us a good one. So, I don't have the exact number, but it's enough to demonstrate this principle. Oh yeah, look at that. Good job.
Yeah, I like it. We'll go towards the beginning again, because at the top it said like number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is so common. All right, right there. Custom 2, custom 3. So people, as a, and I can tell you this is not a FileMaker issue. This is people just with software in general who don't have relevant experience on this. And that is that people will, every time they need a new field, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make this slightly smaller. What they do with a new field is that every time like they have like this new thing in their system they have to track. Like they're building a system and they're at work and they're busily doing their day job, and they're trying to get the FileMaker to be as useful as possible, and they run into this situation like, oh, what do we do if someone returns this blah 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 box, and how do we notate that? And someone will say, just define a field. And I have met customers who would just define any field, and they would put the data in there, and they would put it in the main table. And so if you actually put the unique data into a unique field, even if it's in this is what we call a flat file. There are no related structures to this. It's a single Excel spreadsheet. It's a flat file is the terminology for that, right? And so that you define another column, okay? And you define another column. If you're actually using it religiously, keeping the data in there, this can be cleaned up and salvaged. I will simply point out that I've met a couple customers who were, and it's in our book too, where they would be on a contact screen and they want to talk about a product, or they had a phone call. And literally, I kid you not, this company, which was a heating and air conditioning company, they would actually, like, they have a phone call, someone's air conditioner not working. They would go to the contact record, click into like the city or state field if no one had put an address in there, and start making phone notes about the phone call and that they need a service request. They'd put it in any blank spot they could find. If you do that, not only have you painted yourself into a corner, it's all electrified. So if you try to move out of that corner, you will die, right? So it's not salvageable, right? It's just burn the whole thing to the ground and start over. But if you actually built a new field, like say they were in a FileMaker, just a context table with nothing else, and they had a phone call, and they needed a phone note, they'd add a phone note, and then phone note 2, and then phone note 3, and phone note 4, and phone note 5, and phone note 6. That can be cleaned up and made relational. Now, we have run into customers, and I've run into this. I haven't seen this lately, but I don't do a lot of entry-level coaching anymore. But I had a customer a while back who... they basically maintained vending machines, and they got contracts for like some big companies, like I'll use Apple for example, or Chevron or some big company. And so they maintain vending machines. And the vending machine, so I want everyone to think about this. They're on a vending machine, and they have multiple vending machines, and they have to know where they're at and where to service them. So they have forget the relational stuff. Let's just understand what they did. They just simply said Apple, and then Apple, and then they would say building 5, and then they would say, oh yeah, we also have one in building 6. And they they go in that same field, put comma, building 6, building 7, building 8. So this is the Apple, this is the building it's at. And then over here would be like the floor of the building. Literally, I'm being totally truthful about this. They'd say 4, 3, 8, 5, 2, 1. And then they would list in one field all the machines they had. And so what they did is they go, Richard, we need you to like help me. So when I go to Apple and I'm at building 5, I need to see the list of machines I need to service. And I said, well, you painted yourself into a corner. It won't do that. And so what I did is I took a moment, because this gentleman was he'd built this Excel spreadsheet himself. He had taken Excel, put it in a FileMaker. So it was a FileMaker file that looked and acted just like this. And when I took a moment, I said, well, here's the company that your customer, then you have a location, and then you have a floor on the location, and then you have the machine. So it's like 4 or 5 tables, right? And it really pissed him off. And he threw it away and went back to using his flat file because he thought it was unnecessary. Yet he was mad at me because I wouldn't tell him the secret to give him the report he wanted. Literally, that was a conversation. And Christian, this has happened to you, right? Not too long ago, again?
I think I just realized you were talking about one of my my old customers there. This has happened to me in a variety of places, and I will acknowledge that it's I've done it, in fact. One of my primary customers, a conversation I had with them yesterday, is their number one module that they use.
They're not here, are they? They're not here.
No,
Okay.
and they're fine with this. Their number one module, and it wasn't even me that built it this way, but frankly, at that time, there's nothing I could have done any better. And they inspect medical equipment, and so they have all these different types of assets, and each thing that they inspect, the engineer before me and myself, we added a field for it. And this was great, and it solved a difficult problem. And that's how most of us get in these corners. We confront a problem we don't know a solution to, but FileMaker is so resilient that we can solve it in lots of ways, even though we did the wrong thing. And so for years, a challenge with them is every time they want to change a form, I have to change the user input because there's all these slide panels. And then on the printed document, it's all very rigid. And I finally came to them and I said, you know what? All of these should be related records. If we redesign this, you guys wouldn't have to hire me in the future to sit and make simple changes. But when I first came to you, Richard, this was about another one of my main clients who, when they first hired me, all I did was an import for them, and their table was something like 300 records. And over time, I've worked with this client to make their database better. And the analogy I'd given you the other day is I was trying to explain to them why their database wasn't working. And the gal there, she had made it herself. And to her credit, she made a flat file that worked, but they would have issues when it came to like doing receipts, when it came to registering students. And what it was is they had this smorgasbord Excel sheet. And I told her, imagine you took this Excel sheet and laid it out on their table at the office. And I said, and on your Excel sheet, you've got students, you've got applicants, you have products, you have sales, you have field trips, you have all this stuff. And what you do in your database with all of your layouts is you take that Excel sheet and you nicely fold it just to look at what you need. But what we need to do is cut the Excel sheet down into different pieces and use the relational structure of FileMaker to really do that for us. Now, for her, that was very difficult. But as Richard said, because they had clearly defined all of their fields, fixing the issue was definitely something that could be done. But this is something all of us have probably done and will do.
Every last person who's built a FileMaker file who started from nothing. If you started with as a SQL guy and came to FileMaker, we're not talking about you. But we're talking about like normal humans. You have a need, you have a problem in the business, you realize Excel isn't great, but you get FileMaker and you define everything in your table, and you start spewing your heart out to FileMaker. I need this, and I need this, and I need this, and you just type away, and so suddenly you have a table with 1,000 fields in it. That's not uncommon with people, right?
Yeah, I saw one person. What they do is they hire one of our coaches every year, and I've tried to talk them out of this. I doubt they're listening, but they hire one of our coaches for a couple hours every year because every year they need new fields, because that's what you do every year. You make new fields in the database to represent the next 4 years or what have you. And so I've tried to articulate to them that this is going to be problematic because they're bloating their table. What they need is another table with related records, and then they're not hiring an engineer to build them 4 fields every year. So that's when Richard had said earlier, phone number 1, 2, 3, 4. If there's any field you have in your database where suddenly you have a second, third, or fourth iteration of it, that is typically a sign that you need a related record. If you want to have 2 phone number fields, that's fine. But if your client is a telemarketer and what they track is the ways to contact someone, that very much should be a related table to the contact. But if you're new to FileMaker, it's harder to do that. And so you solve it by just making lots and lots of fields, but it's not the proper way to do it.
Well, and you are painting yourself in the corner, which is a conversation today. So the issue is how to get out of that. Like for those of you who've ever had an addiction of some type or the other, and I'm not pointing at anyone, TK, but if you've been to Alcoholics Anonymous or something like that, that's a program in the United States. You sit around, and the first thing you have to do is admit you have a problem. So TK is a stormtrooper. He drinks and he executes people who don't get along with the Empire. So he'd have to be like the stormtrooper meeting. Yes, all of you have anger issues. Yes. And the first thing they have to do is admit that he has a problem, right? They shoot everyone, right? Right. So you have to admit you have a problem. Step 1 is admitting that you have a problem. Step 2 is then working on that. But if you don't ever admit you have a problem, you can never get past this. Now, I know I'm preaching to the choir. You wouldn't be here if some of you were like, I've got the best FileMaker file, and Richard's a moron, and you could kiss my beep, right? So you're not here. The people that are here understand this, but what we're maybe giving you tips on, recognizing this once again, reframing this conversation, understanding it, and then maybe how you deal with it. But the first step is to have people admit they have a problem. That is not always easy because people are so well invested. We had a customer, and I don't know if they're around or not or whoever. I don't even know who you are, but I got this note that said that they had one of my more talented I would call it a power junior, maybe almost a lead level engineer, who, trust me, is quite talented enough to build a relational database and relational structure. The customer got mad because that they didn't like the answer the engineer gave them, which is you've got to structure this out as related data. They were very mad, and they said that we're not very talented because if we knew what we were doing and we had the sufficient skills, then we could make their flat file do anything at once at super high speed because we're talented programmers. But since we can't do that, we're not very talented, right? And so basically I have someone, it's like Nick says, you're hurting the laws of physics. That's literally what he says. There's the laws of nature, Mother Nature. You're breaking those laws. You can't do that, right? And so, Christian, if you want to chime in on that.
Yeah, I want to chime in on a couple things there because I think that Richard's spot on, and the two things to just expand on that is, the humble pie, eating the humble pie. Really, like Dave from
show your screen, show your face again because we're talking to a spreadsheet. Okay. You're talking to a spreadsheet.
You don't want to talk to the spreadsheet? Oops, my video's not. There it goes. So when we make something with FileMaker, we're extremely proud of it. The analogy that I had given to another engineer is think about like when a little kid comes and brings you one of their drawings. You don't look at them and go, oh, you didn't draw on the lines and those colors don't match. Like that's not really a great way to build somebody up. And when we build our databases, we have a lot of pride in it. And so when someone says to us, you did this wrong, it doesn't look good, it's easy to become defensive about that. The other thing that I've run into over and over again, one of the people that Richard was loosely talking about in the past, and the whole reason I asked him to add some of these to these videos so that we can reference these in the future is, and I fall victim of this too. Why do I need to change anything? I made what I have work. And here's the thing. Some of these painting yourself in the corners, there are solutions to continuing to be in that corner. You can create these complicated scripts that figure out that you need to go from field 2001 to field 2002, or you can create a series of unstored calculations. And at a certain point, you're the only person who's ever going to be able to make your database work. And so it's difficult when someone like myself comes in and goes, well, you're doing it wrong. One of my apps that I'm the proudest of, years ago, the engineer who was training me looked at it and went, oh, that's ugly. It hurt my feelings. And then he told me I'm doing something wrong because I wasn't using the relationships. And I said, okay, but I'm solving the problem and it's working. So why do I have to change it? And the best thing that ever happened to me in terms of becoming a developer was swallowing the pride and getting over the defensiveness to understand how I could be better. And so what I frequently will say to people is, if you're proud of what you have now, think of what it can be if we make it even better than that. But it can be challenging because you're looking at your work of art and someone is offering criticism to it.
Hang on, I'm making notes. If you're proud of it, imagine. Hey, everyone should be taking notes if you have customers. Imagine, Kyle, better be writing this down. Imagine what it could be. Is that Siri?
I guess Siri wanted to chime in.
What it could be if, what would you say? What it could be if you pulled your head out of here? Or would
if you made it even better.
If you made it even better. If you made it.
And I mean, I think about it. I can go find on my computer if I want to, but one of my launchers, it was really a total fruit salad. I understood what all the buttons meant, but they weren't really user intuitive how it was solving things. And it took that engineer looking, because I was showing him, I'm like, look what I made. And he's like, dude, that thing's ugly. and it hurt my feelings. But you know what? I'm very proud to show it to people now. That was the kick in the rear, if you will, that I needed to go out and be like, well, how do I make it better? Richard, one of the challenges I had with you in the beginning, and you have to use my language here, is I would make an app and bring it back to Richard, and he'd be like, that's great, but can you make it less That's really ugly. I want you
Did
to
I
go
say it like that? I'm a
you
bad...
would say it exactly like that. Go
God.
make that less... You know, and I remember you told me, you're like, because I was like, I'm not a designer. I'm not a, that was before Nick even at RCC. And you said, go to Apple's website, go to Amazon, YouTube, go to these big designers and see how they do it and copy them. You don't expect you to make it yourself, but that has to look less like a turd. And sometimes you gotta hear that.
Agent Chevy. So Agent Chevy's like, yeah, Roger that, Big Daddy. I'm like, man, harsh. You guys are so harsh. I didn't realize today was going to be so painful for me. So
well, it was literally with Wolfpack when we got Nick on the call that one day. I was like, this one layout it's not right. Like, there was a couple layouts. I'm like, they're broken. I don't know necessarily how to make them better.
Yeah.
But I'm at least able to acknowledge that. And, Nick was so kind yesterday, not necessarily wanting to hurt my feelings, but I don't take any offense to it anymore, because the only way we're going to get better is to be able to have some of that self-criticism. So understanding how to identify if you're in a corner, whether or not you understand that you're in a corner, is step one. And then the harder part can absolutely be, how do you solve this? So lots of people who end up with files with unstored calculations, they encountered a series of issues that were difficult to solve, and the skills that they had at that time were to use a series of unstored calculations. But as you get better, you have to look at those unstored calculations and go, that's a sign of a mistake, and there's a way for me to make this better and improve it. Same thing if a UI is confusing. There's a video I make all the juniors watch, and it's about doors. And anybody out there can appreciate that if you've pulled or pushed on a door that goes the wrong way, there's a designer out there. He's not FileMaker, but those are called Norman doors. They're named after him because they're designed improperly. And if you think about it, no door should ever need a sign. Doors are very obvious as to how they work. You push on them or you pull on them. So one of the things I've done, at least with myself, in terms of being painted in a corner, is if I notice that a client of mine hits the wrong buttons on something that I built that I'm very proud of, I have to stop and think for a moment. What can I do to make this better? Because if I have to put a sign on the database that says, hey, here's how you use the buttons, that is an indicator that I have made a mistake. No, Apple doesn't have signs all over the OS of what buttons you need to go push. It's supposed to be. We have a video where the guy describes it.
Self-evident.
Yeah,
but
you want to discover it.
Making apps that don't suck.
That don't suck.
Yes. Yeah, that's a really good video. We could share that with these people here. I guess we could do it. It's a super.
Yeah,
secret.
I meant to share the door one. That it's 5 minutes. It's really funny, but that designer, it's a really kind of good point. And again, this goes back to like when I make a new module, I'll actually have Felony Sparkles, my girlfriend, test it because she's technologically illiterate. And so
she's not home, is she?
No, okay. She knows that too. So that iMac is from 2010, and she's happy with it. But I'll have her use the new modules I make because if she's able to go through them with no instruction, I feel confident that most people probably can. And when I show her these new things, my drawing that I'm proud of, and she stumbles and doesn't know what buttons to push, my urge is to teach her how to do it. And sometimes you do have to teach people, but sometimes I have to look at that and go, you know what, Christian? It's not as good as what you thought it was. Let's think about if there isn't a way to get her to realize what buttons to push.
That's exactly correct. I'm going to find a couple videos here, and I'm going to cross-post them into the areas here for you folks so you can catch them up. Making apps that don't suck. I'm going to give this one to you right here. This is a guy named Mike Lee. I'd love that. Like, you guys think I'm pretty special, or maybe not, but I think this guy is infinitely more amazing than I am. I wish I could be Mike Lee. He's really an amazing guy. So, and really big philanthropist kind of thing. Although I don't know he has much money, but he spends his time where he believes in doing things, helping people out and teaching education. So I got the first one here. I'm going to go to Discord. I'm going to post it here if we can get help posting that. There's that one. Hey, Tim from Dublin, Ohio, the real Dublin. I had people yell at me about it. So funny. So that's the first one. It's making apps that don't suck. And then the other one was is the doors one in here, Christian?
I just posted it right above yours.
Oh, you did? Okay, I don't know.
Yes, but I don't know if you want to grab that for YouTube.
Yeah, I'm going to move that over the other one. So this is like homework for you folks. In fact, if we want to talk, if you want to watch these and talk, we can talk about them tomorrow. But it's your homework assignment. But I think they will blow your minds. Really, they both are very similar. And I watch them at least once every year, if not every 6 months, because it reminds me of what sucking looks like. And in the modern terminology, we hear referred to as friction points. Like for example, when Claris was prototyping Cloud 2, Cloud 1, to give you an idea, is technology that required like Jacob Taylor or some brilliant person way smarter than me to actually put it together, right? It was like super difficult, right? And so what ended up happening is that they came to me and it was like if I remember them, Claire's coming to me, and they were all proud of this. And Clay Mackel, who had not worked on it, he's basically like the chief engineer. Like if you call down the engine room at FileMaker, Claire's, engine room, we need more power. And Clay Mackel's like, oh, Captain, what's all we got, right? You know, that's the dude that's down there, okay? Fantastic guy. And so he goes and he tries to do an install of Cloud 1. It takes him, he's a FileMaker, not a developer. He's way beyond. He's a C++ coder. He understands this. He knows 100 times more than Nick knows. That's how smart this guy is. It takes him 3 hours to do an install of Cloud 1. 3 hours of coding to get it to work, to make it work. So Claire's comes to me, and they go, hey, we're brilliant, we're smart people, but just in case we're not as smart as we think we are, we want to run you through a process of trying Cloud 2. So they took my secretary at the time and my wife, I was going to say my wife at the time, but it's the same wife I have right now. and they put them both through this like environment, and my wife and the secretary both shredded Claire. They went down to Claire's before COVID. They were in the little room with glass and cameras and stuff, and like, tell us how, if you saw this screen, it was a 12-step process. And it asks you questions like, well, what would you like to name your server? And what tier of licensing do you think you're eligible for a discount on? And like tier 4 and tier 3 and tier... And I doubt anyone here understands Claris's tiering except maybe me and Ryan Correa. And even Christian doesn't understand the tiering. So if they were asking questions that were hopelessly stupid, they were friction points. It's literally, here's this software we're going to do, right? Here's this software, and there's 12 spots where you can cut your hand on the 12 spots. Oh, yeah. And so after that feedback, they went, ugh. So they went back and redesigned it, and they got it down to about 5 steps now. It's like manageable.
They made it suck less.
They made it suck less. And that was the number one, you guys, you'll see this when you watch the Making Apps That Suck, is that I really wish I could do this. I would do this presentation, but Claris, the guy goes, I really wanted to make a video about making great apps. Because marketing doesn't like when you make a title of a webinar that says making apps that suck less. He goes, but it turns out that telling yourself you're going to make a great app is one of the critical ingredients to making an app that sucks, right? It's funny, it's hysterical. This guy is epic. I highly recommend. But both these videos we're given there are the internal links that we give to our staff. So you're getting super secret behind the action of what's going on. Michelle Gravel, whatever Gravel is. If you have an app, as a question, if you have an app with dozens and dozens of unstored calculations, do you think it's worth the time to fix it, or is it better to redo the application? Really great question. How do you know when to rebuild the application from scratch? And you got to scratch your kitty while you're doing that.
I got to give the kitty a couple pets. It would depend on more than just where those. So let's talk. Let's say you have a flat file with one table with 1 million unstored calculations. I might be inclined to say, hey, let's start from scratch and build it correctly from the ground up. But if you've got lots of tables, if you've got complex file structure, then what you might do instead is decide how are you going to fix those unstored calculations. So when I start with a customer and I notice a lot of unstored calculations, especially if an unstored calculation refers to another unstored calculation that refers to a summary field or an unstored calculation or something through a relationship to that effect, I start to try to ask them about what's going on there. Because usually what's going on is there's a lack of a process. A very simple example of this would be Shazam's first project for Richard. They had a module with a parent and children records, and they needed to figure out if the children records individual weights exceeded the max weight of the parent. So they were somewhat smart. They put a summary field in the child table and compared that against the parent. But that's an unstored calculation. Whereas what they could have done is a GTRR, gotten the summary, or even just looked through the relationship and then cached it locally. So for it was Gravel that asked this, right? One of our regulars in YouTube.
Yeah, he was asking the question about when to redesign. So how do you when
yeah.
I mean, the way I would answer the question, if I was going to answer the question, would be to basically say that if it's just you using it, do you really want to rebuild it? And maybe not. Do you have a team of people, and are they being impaired by what's going on, right? So for example, there is a system that RCC runs. We have several systems. We have a system called BCA, which is a very old system, but it runs our billing, and it's relationally more or less designed correctly, but it's got a really old interface. It's very big. It's a little unwieldy, but it's got a lot of very specific RCC business logic built into it. And I periodically get Christian going, hey, Richard, get off your ass and build a new BCA or whatever he says to me. And I'm like, I said, I'm thinking that's probably an $80,000 project or $100,000 project. It is working. It is ugly. It does work. I originally built it 25 years ago. It's been cobbled and cobbled and cobbled and cobbled. Is it fast enough? Yeah, it works fast enough. It's relationally designed. It runs on the cloud. And we've gone through and removed the unstored calculations as best we can, and we continue to make little improvements incrementally, but it is ugly. It's a really ugly application. You've seen it. It's a modern application if it's 1994. It's modern as hell, but it's not 1984 anymore. So Nick sees this. Can you guys imagine Nick entering his time in our system, and he sees this 1994, not 84, 94 system? Nick, oh, this is the most abomination. It's mandatory. You change this. And he doesn't understand the amount of work that's involved in that. So you have to look at it objectively. Is it servicing your users correctly? Oh, someone said I shouldn't be playing with knives. I might hurt myself. So,
well, I think each case is going to be a little bit different too. Like in one of my own files, I had unstored calculations, and I basically one by one went through trying to eliminate them. But that's somewhat easy where there was an individual one. If you have a series of them connected to each other, then it might be that you need some big structural changes. Siri really wants to contribute to the conversation.
All right. So, questions along the way. Any questions along the way?
One thing I wanted to follow up with what you had said there, Richard. At the start of this conversation, myself, we kept saying, think about if you can make your apps better and better. And when you brought up the making apps that don't suck, it reminded me of that was the moment I changed as an engineer. Is Richard got me to go watch that video on one of my weekends. And one of the things that really touched me that guy said, and it's just a slight different way of thinking about it, but it's what allowed me to become more humble and self-critical, which is that you had said if you seek out to make the best app ever, it's not going to be good. I want to use his own phrasing, which is nobody seeks out to make a bad app. We all seek out to make the best one that we can, and so the revisioning process isn't as much about making an app better as it is about identifying what's not good about your app and making that suck less. If you think about it from that perspective, I think it's easier to accomplish tasks because, frankly, when you start out on something, your thought was, how do I make this as best as possible? Mr. Gravel, when he started off with those unstored calculations, that was the attempt. Now he needs to go back and evaluate each of those unstored calculations. Goes, can this be replaced by scripts? Can this be replaced by relationships? And thinking about how you can individually make little parts of your solution suck a little bit less.
Right.
Same thing a car manufacturer does.
Yeah. It's in fact, I'd love to help some of the car manufacturers. I'd do it for free. But yes, it's like when we had big Slurpee cups, and the car manufacturers were really proud of themselves because they finally put together a car with 30. It had 8 32-ounce cup holders, and I'm like. And people are like, that's stupid, except that when you're driving a car and you can't put your drink down, so you put it between your legs and you're driving and you spill cold or hot coffee on your crotch, it gets everyone's attention real fast. So we like it when you realize that you have an app, it has cognitive overhead. Whether you understand or not, it's more cognitively demanding than it should be, which means it takes more mental mindset. It's your job to realize that you have an app, and your job is to make it suck less. So when I have BC8, and it's been around for a long time, we find a friction point. Once again, here we go, knife. It's a friction point. It's a point where you're going to, as you're using it, you're like poking yourself and, God, this sucks. Can't we make it? So instead of having 8 friction points, let's have 5 friction points. And then maybe next year or in 6 months or whatever, it has 3 friction points, right? And I think that's kind of what Claris tries to do, although I'm sure they don't think about it that way. I'm sure that they think like, hey, it's a great app, so why aren't we rich, right? So that's kind of the trick with that, right? The trick is to find areas and to make it suck, literally make it suck less. And if you can get your head wrapped around that and not have your ego bruised or damaged by that, then that's good. That's really good. Right?
And UK Lad just brought up a really good point in Discord. And whether you're the developer yourself and it's your solution, or the developer and you have a client, he mentioned that an app is a living thing that naturally evolves over time too. And so yesterday when I was having the conversation with my client about this change to their solution, they of course immediately kind of honed in on, oh, well, it should have been this way the first time, so this was a mistake. And you could argue that, but the reality is, think about anything you've ever done in your life, from making an omelet to sanding something to building something. I doubt that there is anybody listening to my voice right now who did something the second time and was like, wow, I did it way better the first time. We all do things better the second and third and fourth time. And so one of the things I talk to my clients about at the beginning of the project is that everything we do is going to be revisionary. And so when I make you a script that works and I go back and spend several hours on it later, don't be surprised, because I need to make it work, and then I need to make it work much better and faster and dynamically, just like I, as a developer, made something work 4 years ago and have since learned how to make things work faster, better, and more dynamically, because it is a living thing. And most people who are telling us to work on the databases or our own databases don't know what the finished product is until you start to get there. And so it makes sense to sit and hobble things together and then actually go through and revise what you have there. Just like if you were writing Richard just got done writing the book. Richard, you want to chime in on what editing looks like? Or did you just write it one time and it was perfect?
Yeah, no, I'm just there's a conversation going there. Yeah, no, the book is a real challenge. And editing it, you realize, I mean, never mind the fact that you swear it's clean, and then on page everyone here has mostly, I think, book version, what we call build number X17. We're working on an X18 or 19 or whatever it is, and it'll just be slid in, and people won't even know it. But like in the middle of the book, it's like Haley was editing something, and the cat got on the keyboard and just destroyed like the middle of the sentence. It's like a bunch of garbage characters, and that went to publisher. It's in the printed book like that. You folks have it. You'll see it. It's like it was trying to say something, and it's like, and then it keeps going, and I'm like, what the fuck? How did that happen? How did it get through proofing? How could we not? I mean, it is always going to be something. And it's shocking. I've talked to Claire's about this, and even as you develop, and you're pretty sure you have a bug-free thing, and you've gone to testing, and people are testing, hey, it's great, it looks good. I mean, Kyle looks at it, oh, it's wonderful, right? And then you get it out there, and you're like, and it's like 2 + 2 is 12, and you're like, how did this ever get in there? So, yeah, so I think it's understanding that you're going to always have revisions. The goal is to strive for goodness. Strive for goodness. Like nursery school, right? Strive for goodness, be a good person. But understand that you're going to have continuous revisions, right? And if you're working with a junior developer, say like a $75 an hour coach, the reason they're $75 an hour coach is because they're still learning too. And we're going to try to keep them on the straight and narrow. But it's like we ran into someone who's like, hey, this coach sucks. They're $75 an hour. I said, you're getting a highly trained person that knows way more than you. Are they perfect? No. If you want perfect, that's not even possible. Let's just pretend Christian's perfect. Christian's $1.50 an hour, right? And so at least double, if not more. So you have to pay for the higher degree of perfection. The coaches are supposed to help train you, right? But yeah, so it's always everyone's on their learning curve. Everyone's here. So
one of the examples. It's too late today to bring up new specifics, but one of the ones I want to talk about tomorrow, in terms of being painted into a quarter, is a type field, and this one's a little more complicated. And Richard, we can jump into it tomorrow, but this is, to use starting point as an example. You have the accounts module, and so using the accounts module as both an account and a vendor. That is, you have a table, products as a product or a service. And this isn't a hard, fast rule of yes or no, but it's definitely something over the years I've evolved my thinking on, because I got myself into several corners with it. And so now I have certain rules that I use there. Another one, and it's not as obvious, but it's naming conventions. I was talking to Calvin about this yesterday, and what you name things matters, even if it doesn't at like a functional level, because we, as the people reading things on screen, can trick ourselves over stupid things. So some of the things I want to talk about tomorrow are, hey, this is something that I used to do that I don't do anymore, or I have these specific rules because of these experiences that happened to me.
That would be a good one. So tomorrow should we talk about what we have, the new rules we created to compensate for the previous stupid things we've done, right? So TK warns people twice before he shoots them in the back of the head with the blaster, right? Instead of just shooting them initially without even thinking about it, right? So yeah, no, it's like, pow. It's like that one movie, the first one, The Force Awakens, right? And then they have the one stormtrooper is like, what's his name? Finn, right? He's questioning himself. So there you go. So there you go. So anyway, we played with knives. We played with stormtroopers. We got Judge Judy on the screen here. I'm actually cross-threading the Discord conversation at the same time that you're going. Ellen's keeping it very interesting. The Godfather's paying with his pussycat, right? Meow meow. Right. Very cute.
I mean, it's kind of required if you're a developer to have a cat around.
Well, the problem is I just don't want my cats in here demanding, because they start demanding treats from me, and I don't want to be shaking treat bag in the middle of the broadcast. So, all right, cool. Well, that's it for today. We're going to pick this conversation up tomorrow. All right. Cool. All right. Well, I appreciate everyone. We'll catch you tomorrow. Thanks.
the whole way. Calm, cool, collected, the quarterback. Great read, good patience. More importantly, great job up front protecting this quarterback to give you a chance. And that's all you can ask for.
Try to rally down 10. 9:25 to go here in the fourth. Short motion by Amendola from the left. Brady takes the shotgun snap, stands in, throws it left for Amendola, reaches up and snacks a high throw and lands inside the 10, rolling to the 9. Ball slightly behind him, but Danny makes the grab.